All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another mini session. My name is Mike Martinez with the Maricopa County School Superintendent's Office. We are coming to you live from our little podcast room in the corner of our office, and I have with me today Miss Andy De La Rosa. Andy, say hi.
Hello, everybody.
Andy, how long have you been working for the county?
Going on 2 years.
2 years. And you worked in HR before coming here, right? You were at a district. So you came into our office kind of already familiar with some school processes and a lot of these things. And I know you did a contracts minEASE a few months back, which went really well. So now we're back with EPARs today, and we're going to talk a little bit about EPARs, talk about basics of getting them set up, the basics of using them, how the different approval routing works within EPAR. So there's a decent amount of information that's going to be coming at you today. So feel free to ask questions as we're kind of going through the chat. I will be monitoring the chat. We have a couple other people from our office that will also be monitoring as well. So if you have any questions, throw them in there. We will do our best to answer everything before we finish up today. And as always, if you see something cool but don't quite remember everything, why we don't have handouts for today's session, this will be recorded and posted on YouTube next week. The one we did last week, for garnishments, is out on YouTube already. We'll send out all the links next week as soon as this one is finished and posted, and then we'll be ready to go. So Andy, why don't you go ahead and share your screen and tell us a little bit about EPARs today.
Can I get a thumbs up for those that can see my screen?
Thanks much, Bob. That means a lot.
Wow.
All right. So EPARs, several of you, I'm sure already know, EPAR is an employee personnel action request, or also known as electronic personal action request. With EPARs, you can electronically notify departments when an employee is hired, transfers, terminates. You'll always have a record of an EPAR for years to come. You just have to refer back to the correct fiscal year database. You can attach documents, any backup documents to the EPARs, and you will get email alerts notifying you that EPARs are in your queue to approve or to complete. And EPARs can be tracked and not get lost on your desk. I know some people who, back when I was at a district, I started off when we were using paper EPARs, and yeah, it was hard to track those down. So now, electronically you can track those and see whose queue it's in, where about in the approval process it's at. That's the fun part of an electronic employee personnel action request. So let's get started. I'm just going to go down the list here. If I go too fast, pop in the chat. I'll try to just go at a good pace where everybody can follow along. Like Mike said, I don't have a handout. I just have some notes for myself. But if there is something you guys want some more information on, let us know. Email fss@maricopa.gov and we can put something together for you. So we'll get started in human resources. Maybe. Configuration and PAR workflow. We're going to go into PAR types. PAR types, these are the 6 predefined EPARs that are in the system. You can't edit them, you can't delete them. You can, however, add a user-defined field to them. I'm going to go into current employee assignment. This is the name of the PAR. If you want your EPAR to allow editing during the approval process, you're just going to check this box, which most districts, I believe, do have this box checked. These 4 columns here is where you would add a user-defined field for this EPAR. Once you add a user-defined field, you cannot remove it. So just be cautious of what you add to that PAR. For example, you can add board approval date, job posting number, any customizable field that you want for this particular EPAR, you can add it, and then you can mark it whether you want it required. So if it's required, it's not going to allow that user to go forward to the next tab to submit the EPAR until that field is completed, it's gonna highlight it with a red box to let you know, hey, you can't move forward until that box is completed. Include substitutes in employee selection. You're going to mark this option to include substitutes in employee selection window for all DACs. If this option is clear, substitutes are only included in employee selection window for HR and payroll central site users. This option is only available for a current employee assignment EPAR and a pay change EPAR. Display PAR type in portal. When you go into EPARs and you're going to start an EPAR, this is where if it's checked, you're going to see it in your drop down. If it's not checked, it won't be available to that user to view, to see that EPAR. Only show vacancies residing in users DAC. This option only displays for new hire and current employee assignments. And if you want a DAC user to only view the vacancies in the DAC when creating a PAR of this type, that's when you want to be able to check that. And or I'm sorry, if this is checked, the user can view vacancies outside his or her DAC while he or she is in the supervisor on the vacant position. I'm going to get out of this one, and I'll show you for leave of absence. You'll see that the substitute box isn't showing up, and neither is the DAC selection, just the display part type in portal. Same goes for, you can add user defined fields for all the parts.
So is it just up to 4 user defined fields?
It is.
Okay, so you are kind of limited on that.
You are, and there's only the characters that you add into it is, I want to say like 2025 that you can add.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be it's limited on what you can add. There's also another section where you can add user defined fields, and I'll go over that when we get there.
Okay, cool.
User defined PAR types. So you can add another PAR other than the predefined ones that show up in the system. In this case, I added 2, the internal transfer and leave of absence FMLA. But when you add it, you'll see that you can no longer change the PAR caption name. The field grays out for you. But if you don't want it to show up in the drop-down box, you just deselect active and it will no longer show in your drop-down box. It still has the option that you want to allow editing during the approval process. Use employee selection. You'll see that if I uncheck it, it grays this field out. If I do check it, the 3 options that you'll have is DAC employees, all employees, and supervised employees. DAC employees, when you're adding a PAR, only employees from the user's DAC would be shown. If you select all employees, when adding the PAR, all employees would be shown. And then supervised employees, only employees who are supervised by the user would be shown.
So that's assuming that in HR, they are maintaining the supervisor field in HR in the positions themselves. Because I've seen a lot of instances where there are supervisors in there that are no longer with the district.
Mm-hmm.
And so that always caused a little bit of a kink. So yeah, that's one of those things that just has to be maintained along with.
Yep. And that's if you choose this box here. You could also use position selection. So you'll see that when I check this box, vacancy status and position or supplemental fields will open up. Vacancy, it's just filled or vacant. Position or supplemental, you can do position, supplemental, or both. So when an employee or when a user is submitting an EPAR and position is, or I'm sorry, when field is selected in the vacancy status, these are only positions for selected employee that would be shown. And then for vacant, only vacant positions would be shown. And then down in the position and supplemental positions, only positions would be shown, only supplementals would be shown, or you can select it for both, where both positions and supplementals will be shown. And again, once you add a predefined PAR, you can't delete it, but you can deactivate it where it doesn't show up in the drop-down box. DAC email addresses. All you're going to do is enter an email address for that DAC. I mixed it up here. We had FSS for academic services, for business services. We have Jill for Clinton Ranch School. I have Jeff, and so on. So whoever your contact is for that DAC, those are the email addresses that you're going to put in those fields. That's it. And we move on to the fun stuff.
I'll admit, I didn't know DAC email addresses was a thing until you went over this with me the other day. I'm like, what is this used for? Oh, because every DAC is going to have their own sort of contact for that. And I'm like, okay, it makes sense. I've just never seen them before. So.
Yep. All right, now we're going to go down to security. User security. And I am going to pick on Crystal Ball. The HR payroll security options, you'll see that Crystal Ball is a PAR originator. So she won't have the access to allow user to skip a PAR approver. So if someone is not in the office and this PAR is stuck in somebody's queue and it needs to be approved, this person would not be able to approve it, to skip that approver because it's not checked. You can, however, make, whatever users you want to allow to skip an approver, this is what you would check. Or you can set up alternate approvers if someone's going to be out of the office. Show all DAC PARs. This is when someone's going to submit an ePAR. It's going to show all DACs, not just that user's DAC. And then send PIN email. This will send an email. A PIN email has more specific PAR related information in the email. And I'll go over that in another section. But there's the capability, an option to send PIN emails.
So there was a question that kind of popped up. Are DAC email addresses required?
Yes, I would say yes. You want to make sure that anybody in that particular DAC is notified about on an ePAR that is out there. Maybe for smaller districts, it might not be.
I don't know if the system requires it. I don't think it does. Certainly best practices would require that to have that contact information in there.
I can go back in there and see if I can add one. Let's select. I don't know if anybody was
Select one that's already been done. And
which one was already done? Do you know?
I don't know.
I think it was.
I think all of them. Yeah, Clinton Ranch. And put an email address in there. Make one up.
I can type. It let me.
Where'd it go? Go back in there.
Sure did.
That's interesting. I wonder how that routes then. I wonder if it just sends an email to
both or.
Yeah. Does the email notify at every change or every time it's approved?
We'd have to test that out. I tried testing the PIN one here and I kept getting a undeliverable.
We kept getting an error. Oh, well, but it tried to go though.
End. Yes.
Oh, okay. Did it do that every time something changed in the park? No.
No.
It was just when, yeah.
It's if I actually went to go and send that.
Okay.
I did it from the portal. Okay, so back to security, and then now we're going to go into workflow configuration. This section is like the meat of the PAR settings. I'm just going to go down the list. PAR approval templates. Here in our trading database, it's account-based routing. We just have account code. 9 out of 10 times, name and description is the same. par approvers. So we have myself, Jeff, and Jill set up as par approvers. It's account-based routing, so I selected the template, the one template that I have in the system, which is account code. Sequence. You want to make sure to space out your sequence. You don't want to 1, 2, 3 sequence, because anybody that might be leaving and coming in, you want to leave room for them to add, you want to leave room to add them and to make sure those sequences are spread out. So you want to do more of a 10, 20, 30, 40, that kind of thing in case people are added and removed. I'm going to go over the information tab. New hire assignment, staff termination, pay change. These are all the predefined EPARs that are in the system. And when they're checked, that user can see those EPARs. When they're not checked, they won't be able to see those EPARs in that dropdown. Under job, this is where you would select a PIN email. It allows this user to send a PIN email. And like I said, PIN emails are more specific on the PAR. Any information that's on that PAR, that's what will be sent out. Standard email, it's just small standard information that will get sent out regarding the PAR, just notifying you, hey, you have a PAR. That goes for all the predefined PARs. Alternate approvers. So you can set up alternate approvers not only from the PAR approver screen, which where I'm at here, but you can also set it up in the workflow in the portal. And I'll try to remember to go over that when we're in there. So if Jeff is on vacation and we see that PARs are being backed up in his queue, he didn't set an alternate approver. Those who have access to PAR approvers in security can go in and set that up. So if Jeff's gone and I want Jill to approve all his EPARs, then I'm going to go and select Jill and then the dates that Jeff will be gone. That way, during that time that he is gone, Jill, nothing gets backed up, nothing gets held up. So Jill's able to go in there and approve. But just so you know, when you set an alternate approver, it's a little confusing at times because you're actually going to approve that PAR more than once, depending how many people have you set up as an approver. So you're going to approve it for yourself, and then you're going to approve it for the person you're covering for. So you'll see that sometimes pop in your queue. You're going to be like, well, wait a minute, I've already approved that EPAR. Why is it still showing up in my queue? Well, you're set up as an alternate approver. That's why you need to go back in and approve it again. Any questions so far?
So does the system revert EPARs already sitting in their bucket if you add an alternate, or does it have to be done before they are out?
No, it doesn't have to be done. It kind of gets lost in the system, but eventually once that alternate is set up, it's a matter of, I don't want to say logging in and out, going back in, but it's something that'll pop up where you can go back in and approve it. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah, so the system kind of refreshes those workflow counts when you come in, or you can kind of force those workflow counts to show up. But yeah, so if someone left, whether they be terminated or suddenly had to leave and they had something sitting in their account, you could set up an alternate approver, and then that alternate approver would be able to go in and approve that part to go forward, kind of push it forward.
And if there's, just to chime in here, if your PAR is sitting in, for example, Andy's bucket and she's on vacation and we go set an alternate, there'll be an error that'll pop up to whoever tries to approve it saying, hey, you're not the next approver. And then the system kind of resets it to the alternate. It's not really an error. It's more of like a notification.
Yep. Thank you, Jill. PAR approver accounts, is that what we just went in? Okay, PAR approver accounts. This is where these PARs are being routed. Who's going to be getting the PARs? Right now, myself, Jeff, and Jill have all question mark logic. So we're gonna see all EPARs coming through. If I only wanted Jeff to see PARs that are just, only a site code. So let's just say site code of 300. I'm going to enter 300. If I only want him to see EPARs that begin, or I'm sorry, an object code that begins with a 5. I'm going to type in a 5 here, and he's only going to see those EPARs that come through. But right now, we're all set up in the system to receive all EPARs. Reassign PAR approvers. If someone has left the district and you have that person's replacement, you can set them up here because you're reassigning that person. So say Jeff is leaving the district. I'm going to enter him because he is the current approver. And then I'm going to add the new approver. Once they're added into the system, I'm going to add that person to now take over those EPARs that Jeff was receiving. You can also go into actions and PARs by current approver. This is going to print out a PDF list of PARs that are in Jeff's queue to where that new approver can be like, okay, now I need to make sure these PARs get pushed through. They're not stuck anywhere. But that's just something that another thing that you can double check so that PARs are not sitting out there waiting to be approved. PAR security roles. Most districts have 3 roles, which is the HR payroll role, PAR originator, remote user. Smaller districts might have maybe 1 or 2. Larger districts might have a few more. Again, it's just name and description. Just name your role. PAR security. So all your EPARs are going to be listed here, and you'll see that here under role name, these are all, I'm going to filter actually so that you can see. You'll see that the roles that I have in the system, which are the 3 HR payroll, PAR originator, and remote user, they're all going to be assigned to that PAR, those PAR types. Current employee assignment, new hire, termination. I'm going to pick on the HR payroll. Oops. So this EPAR, these fields in this particular EPAR, you can mark them whether that user has full access, no access, read only, or I'm sorry, no, view only, no access. And then you can select whether you want that field to be required for that user. Again, it'll highlight that field in red for those. Thank you. Can you tell I'm getting dry here?
It happens.
So these fields here, you can mark whether they're required. You'll see that a few of them are required. So if I were to try and go and enter a current employee assignment EPAR, I won't be able to move forward if I don't fill out these particular fields, because the system will stop me and say, hey, it's a required field. You gotta complete them. You do want them enabled. Hide history. This hide history, that was a new one for me, actually. Let's see if I can find it. As you can see, I'm not going over my notes. This option controls whether or not the PAR history log is displayed in Visions. The default is set to display the history log, is to display the history log. Propose funding security level. So when you submit an EPAR, a new hire, current employee assignment, I believe it's the information tab. The bottom portion where it says proposed funding, what the new pay is going to be for that employee, what the pay is going to be for, say, an extra duty for a current employee assignment. That is giving this user full access so that they can go in there and actually enter that information in that section of the EPAR. That's that on that. Same for all. If I go back out, go back in here. That's going to be the same for all your EPARs. You can set that. I had a district one time call, and I think it was their benefits person said, I can't I can't approve this EPAR. You know, sometimes when they come into your queue, rather than you opening the EPAR and going through each tab and then going to submit for approval, some people just automatically check that little checkbox and go to actions and then approve. And it's not allowing you to. This benefits person was like, why can't I submit this EPAR? This is the message I keep trying to submit for approval. Well, they didn't open up the EPAR and go through the tabs and realize that there was some fields there that were required for that benefits person, because it was some benefits information that needed to be filled out. It wasn't allowing them to. So they had to go in and open that EPAR to see what those fields were. Security, okay. User-defined fields. This is another section where you can add user-defined fields to your EPAR. I did create one for current employee assignment. You would name your user-defined field, and again, you can't delete these user-defined fields. This one I selected that I wanted a field to be named board approval. I wanted to make it a date field, and I marked it as required. So when somebody submits a current employee assignment, they're going to get to that additional information tab, because when you add user-defined fields, it's going to add those fields in the additional information tab of the EPAR. You can make it required. And then any of this information here, like say if I were to select, I'm going to go in and act like I'm going to add a new one so you can see. I want to select that it's a text field. And this is where I would type my information in. This is where you're limited the number of characters that you can use. You can type in. PARs, for PARs only, this is basically the same area, same field security that I just went over in PAR security. This area doesn't get used. That's what I've noticed, is that this section here doesn't get used. It gets used in the PAR security area in security.
And like all user-defined fields, once you add them, they're there forever. So be very careful about what you choose to add. And I say whatever, and I say it in the most air quotey way that I can. It can be undone if you have a new fiscal year. If you're hosted by our office, we have gone in there and removed user-defined fields before. It's not something I enjoy doing because it's really kind of buried in there. If you're not with our office, you can pay Tyler to do it, and they will do it for you for a nominal cost, whatever that happens to be. So again, just be very careful about adding those user-defined fields. I know a lot of you probably have a user-defined field in there, and then years later, you're like, yeah, we don't need that anymore. I wish we can get rid of that. We'll be happy to help you, happy to talk with you about it if we host you, and you know, we try to help out when we can, but just be very careful about messing with that stuff, because it becomes a pain in the butt to deal with if you don't use it.
There's also a maximum number of user-defined fields you can have. So keep that in mind too. I think that's 20 on a specific, like current employee PAR or something.
Yeah, you're limited by whatever the screen can maintain.
Correct.
Like in employee maintenance, you can have like a dozen fields in there, because that's just how much space is on the screen in employee maintenance. So everything, there's a limit to everything. So just be careful.
I was working with the district the other day on PARs, and they had a list of user-defined fields. That was the most I've seen. I was like, whoa, it was all drop-down fields, which was, if they want, they can get as detailed as they want, but they were using it. It's out there.
That's what matters. If
Yep.
you use it, then use it. And somebody paid good money for this system. So take advantage of it, however, as much as you can.
All right, now I'm going to go into the portal.
Andy, you good?
Good. Everybody can see my portal?
Yep.
Another thumbs up. Great. Okay. All right, I'm going to just go straight into my workflow, just so I can show you where an alternate approver can be added in this area. These are some PARs I currently have in my queue. But if you go to actions, alternate approvers, this is where you can set your alternate approver. Jeff's gone. I want Jill to approve his PARs while he's gone. I'm going to select Jill, dates, save. Don't forget that little save. It looks like a floppy disk, that little save button.
No one knows what a floppy disk is anymore, Andy. They're like, oh, it's just a save icon. Well, kids, back in the day, we used to have these little pieces of plastic. And if you were lucky, you had the 3 1/4 and not the 5 1/2 ones where you had the big old floppy disk. So
and so in workflow, you can select your ePARs, actions, approve PAR. You can return it to the originator, or you can return it to the prior approver. And when you do that, let's just say these two are already returned. So I'm gonna go here, return to originator. Okay. Oh, okay, maybe not. This one's already approved, or I'm sorry, returned. That's why. New. This is still in Crystal Ball's queue. She created the PAR, but she didn't submit for approval. So if I were to check actions, approve PAR, okay. You'll see now it's gonna remove the PAR from the queue, and it's still showing the 2 that were returned to her. Try to get it over here. These 2 were returned to her. I'm gonna get out of workflow, and then I'm gonna go into HR, human resources, employee PARs, employee personnel action request. And then I'm gonna apply selection. It's gonna bring everything that's in this. You guys probably can't see that, but I can. Okay. Here are the ePARs. Here's the PAR type. You'll see there's current employee assignments, staff termination, pay change, the description, PAR date, everything, all the information you need to know on the PAR. You can see it here in the grid, or you can open up the PAR to review all that information. You'll see here, there are several of them that are in process. Well, look, they're all in, majority of them are in Jeff's queue. He's on vacation. He really is on vacation today, if you guys didn't notice.
that dude takes every Friday off. I don't know who he thinks he is. I mean, he like takes every Friday off. I have no idea what he does. He does like going out to the shooting range though, which I don't know, I guess is pretty cool, I guess. But
and it's technically his last Friday before he comes.
Oh yeah,
into the office
we start
full-time.
back in the office next week, so that'll be his last Friday. I'm not giving him any more Fridays off. So had it with him.
Yep. So you'll see here that there are several of them in Jeff's queue that need to be approved. And now that Jill is assigned as an alternate approver for him, then she can go in there and actually approve these ePARs for him. You'll see the 2 that were returned to Crystal Ball. I'm sorry, that's the name. I'm sorry, to Crystal Ball here. You can return them, you can approve them, mark as completed, but I want to show you the user-defined field that I created for the current employee assignment. If I go next, or just click on the tabs up top, the proposed funding area that I was telling you guys about, whether you guys have full access, view only, or no access, this is the proposed funding section of the ePAR. For those that are new. So additional information, here's where I added the user defined field. It goes under additional information. If I did not have this date here and I try to go next, this is where it highlights it in red, stating this is a required field. I need to enter this, I need to enter a date in order to move forward. And it allows me to move forward. You continue to go through your tabs. You can enter comments and it'll basically date stamp the user that made the comment, the date, what the comment is. And then history, any changes you made to this particular EPAR, it's going to list all the different changes in this, in the history tab. Review, and then any changes that you might have made, you'll have the checkbox to submit for approval, and then finish. I wrote down a few items to touch on, because earlier when we were testing, Jill and I were testing some of this. Anytime I would submit an EPAR, it was going directly to HR completion. We're like, what is going on? Why does it keep going to straight to HR completion? It should go to the next approver, which was, I believe, Jeff. So when you're in positions and pay, I'm gonna have to go back and forth. All right, so if you go into positions and pay, whether it's through payroll or HR, pull up my BFF. And this is going to be account, or I'm sorry, approval template. This was not set up in positions and pay. So because the system is set up for account-based routing, it was just going directly to HR completion. So this was missing. I think something else was set up in there, or some of them were blank. So it was like, what is going on? Why isn't it routing like it should? Well, it was because it wasn't set up here. So always make sure, if you run into an issue where it's like, why are these EPARs going directly to HR completion? It's this field right here, approval template. Just make sure this is selected. Another is when someone goes in to submit an EPAR, and I'm gonna have to go back and forth. Sorry, guys. We'll go back to the portal. All right. So if I want to go in and add a whole new EPAR, do it new, let me go back. This is the drop down that I was telling you guys, that if it says that checkbox in PAR types, that little box, if it's not checked to display in portal, this is where they'll either show up or they won't show up, depending on if that box is checked or not. So here I'm going to submit a new hire EPAR. You can either fill out this information, and if for those districts that have it set up, you can go to actions, get applicant, and it's based on what applicant tracking system that you guys have at your district. You can get applicant and then type the new employee last name, address. You can filter however you want, and it'll show a list of them here in this grid, and you can select them, and it's going to automatically populate those fields that they completed in their application. It'll fill those fields in here in your EPAR. Saves you some time typing.
Yeah,
Go
there
ahead.
is an extra licensing cost. If you have an applicant tracking or applicant management system, there is a Tyler licensing cost to get it to interface like this. You can usually get that quote from Tyler, or if you post it through our office, we can get you a quote for that. But it is nice to be able to just automatically pick the person's application. Like, for example, like Talented is one we've worked with in the past. I think AppleTrack, and it really just kind of imports all that information there, makes it a lot easier. So if your HR people are doing double the work, there's a reason for some of this functionality that's in here, kind of cut down on any sort of manual errors.
So when you go in to add a position to the EPAR that you're trying to submit, and your payroll HR department says, grab record ID such and such, or control code such and such, and you don't see that code listed in your grid here, there could be two things. One, the position may be closed in positions and pay, so it's not going to show up in your grid. Two, that position is filled. So it's either they put the new hire in that position too early, or they have not vacated that position for the employee who left. So that position's not going to show up in your grid. Those are just some things, because a lot of times we've had districts call and say, hey, well, what's the deal? Why can't we see it? We see it in positions and pay, but we're not seeing it. Well, because that position either hasn't been vacated or it's showing that it's closed. Just some things to troubleshoot when you're submitting your EPARs. I think that is it. And then we can go into email.
Now let's talk about email alerts.
Okay.
Go ahead and switch on over to the core product. Everyone should be using email alerts. If you are not using email alerts, I want everybody to hold up your right hand and then slap your face with it. Because it is just one of those things that will make your life so much easier to sort of manage and remind everybody of things that are happening and things that are going on. So email alerts, first, you have to have the email settings set up. Can we go into email settings really quick? And this is a thing that you'll need to do, because the new fiscal year, if you start working on stuff in the new fiscal year, you'll need to make sure you do this in the new year. So in security workflow configuration under email settings, here's all the basic information. Someone will need to put in an email server for you, a basic default send from blah, blah, blah. And then the little notification settings down at the bottom, what days you want these email alerts to go out. You know, typically there's going to be like Monday through Friday from start of business till close of business, maybe a little bit after, but make sure those boxes are checked. But what you need to do is go up to actions, and under the actions menu, there is an option that says create alert job. If you have not done that for the new year, your email alerts will not run in the new year unless you create that alert job. That is the item that automatically kicks off all these emails for you. So make sure you update that. Most of you should already have a new fiscal year 21-22 that is created out there. So make sure you work with whoever's managing your security and your workflow information, that someone goes in there and creates that alert job, because then suddenly at some point you're going to realize you're not getting any emails anymore. All right, so go ahead and show us some email alerts that work with EPARs, Andy.
HR completion, HR PAR completion. You want to make sure your email alert's active, and you can set the frequency. You can run it once a day, every 4 or 5 hours, as a reminder, hey, you have a PAR sitting in your queue waiting to be approved, or if something was returned, kicked back for whatever reason, you can set that up here. So you can set it by minute, hour, day, or month. I know a few districts have it set up to send the email like every, say, 8 o'clock in the morning, at noon, and then another at 4. That's for HR completion. Then there's another, is it payroll? Payroll. And then there's PARs to approve.
So here's your PARs to approve email that you were asking about a little bit earlier. And well, I'm gonna have to scroll back up and see. Well, oh, never mind. I scrolled too fast. I don't know. You know who you are. So the PARs to approve email. And this is one of those things you probably want to set to go out more than a couple times a day. What's that set up right now, Andy?
5.
So every 5 hours, this email will kick off. It'll kick off first thing in the morning when your district opens up. I think the email settings were set to 8 o'clock, right? Mm-hmm. So it'll kick off at 8 o'clock. Then it'll kick off 5 hours after that. Then it will kick off 5 hours after that. So it's going to go out a few times a day. So if they're kind of just sitting on it, they're just going to get spammed to the point where they just give up and give in and go in and approve the PAR. And it does go, you don't have to set anything else up in the screen for this particular email alert, because it's automatically going to send to your PAR approver. You don't need to type in any email address or where closet. Leave all that stuff blank. I will recommend you at the bottom, there's the additional email text. that is where you're going to put in what fiscal year this email alert happens to come from, because the email alert from FY22 and FY21 are identical. So they'll just get an email alert that says you have PARs to approve, but it won't tell you which year you have PARs to approve. So your people are like, I don't understand why I'm still getting this email. I don't have anything in my queue. Well, it turns out that email alert was still on from last year, and you have some holdover PARs that are still in FY21 that you haven't approved yet. So something needs to happen there. So we recommend that additional text line for every year, for every email alert that your district uses, go in there and add in which fiscal year that email alert is from. For districts that we host, I think we actually have a script that goes through and does this for you. So hopefully that takes care of that. But for districts that we don't host, make sure you go in there and you update that so you know where these email alerts are coming from.
And another area I wanted to go over is going to be in human resources. Wait, employee PARs. Of course, employee personnel action request, this will kick you off to the portal, but PAR reporting. If you want to track down where certain PARs are, you can also look at it in your portal, in your queue, to see where they are in the approval process. But you can also go into PAR reporting. And the only thing that you can do here is you can't do anything in your grid other than sort, filter, that kind of thing. But this just tells you where these particular EPARs are sitting at right now. Here's your next approver, whether they're in process, returned, completed, when they are completed. But this is another section. You can pull them up by group if you use groups, pull them up by DAC, by a PAR type, apply selection. Here are my current employee assignments, and here's where their status is, and here's where they're at in the approval process. I never used this when I was at the district. Didn't even realize it was there. Jill was the one that told me about this. I'm like, oh. So that's another spot that you can track your EPARs.
Just another one of those things that get added to the product that you find out about years later, and like, oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Mm-hmm.
It still boggles my mind how many people get freaked out when you tell them about like brackets for account codes and using, you know, the little bracket symbols and the hyphens and everything like that. And like, oh my God, it's the coolest thing. Well, yeah, you've been able to do that for like 5 years now. So that's why it's really good to get back into this mini session, back in the user groups. Keep track of what's going on in Tyler community, because there's always things out there to learn. There's certainly a lot of things under EPARs that I didn't know. I'm not an EPAR person. I've kind of did my best. I've managed to avoid them for a decade now. So I'm going to keep that streak going, and I keep surrounding myself with people that know it way better than I do. So I have Andy here and Jill, of course, kind of our experts on EPAR. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out there and contact them. It's andy.delarosa@maricopa.gov or jill.win@maricopa.gov. Either one of those ladies will be happy to answer any questions you have. Any parting thoughts you want to leave us with, Andy?
No, I think that's it. Anybody has any questions? Or was the report? Our report, it's in HR, human resources, employee PARs, and PAR reporting.
And I don't know how new that is. So if you're in there and you don't see it, it's probably something that's limited by your security settings or in Infinite Visions administration. So like a lot of things, as new screens get added, they are by default added with zero access to them. So if you don't have it, make sure to ask one of your Infinite Visions administrators and they can add it for you. Other than that, I think that's it.
Let us know if you guys have any questions. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everybody. Just one last plug before you go. We have another mini session scheduled for May 11th. This was actually part two of a session we did a few weeks ago when we talked about, what did we talk about? Salary schedule. Yeah, we started talking about salary schedules and we kind of went down a rabbit hole and then started talking about work calendars and pay cycles. So on the 11th, we're going to have a mini session on work calendars and pay cycles and setting them up for the new year. So it's one of those things that you only do once a year and you don't know what you don't know, and highly recommend you attending. The registration link went out to everyone today. If you didn't get a registration link, send a message over to me and I will make sure you get a copy. Feel free to forward it to anybody. We can hold on these meetings, we can hold up to 300 people, some 300 or 500. And then of course we put it on YouTube so we can watch, I'd love to get to 1 million subscribers one day. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't play any musical instruments and I'm not that funny. So thank you, everybody. We hope to see you again in another week and a half for the work calendars and pay cycles. Have a great weekend. Be safe out there. Take care of yourselves and go have some fun. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Beth, I'll work on the pretty
Yeah.
notes for you.
So apparently next week is Teacher and Administrator Appreciation Week at McDonald's. You get a free breakfast sandwich, coffee, or bakery item if you present your school ID. You still have a school ID? I'm trying to think of how many McDonald's I pass on my way to work.
Get everybody.
Here you go, guys. There's a dozen egg McMuffins and some hot coffees.
Short, very, very short trip.
Did you put in a time request for that?
I did, and you haven't accepted it.
Oh, well, we shall see about that.
You verbally gave me the okay.
I verbally say a lot of things that I don't mean.
You are right. You are right.
Oh yeah, we're all back in office next week.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm kind of okay because it started last week. Well, with the exception of like Thursday, Friday, which I wasn't here. So I guess I didn't start last week. So I guess I started this week. 5 days in a row. Did we used to do this all the time? This is some
Mhm.
like, oh, this is rough. Okay, so Andy, tell me, you texted me the other day about something about some pickles.
So sliced pickles covered in nacho cheese and crumbled hot Cheetos. I want to try that. So I texted
Right?
Mike again.
And
His
I'm like,
response.
the hell we do.
You did not say that.
Okay, I said it was a little more
said-
explicit. I guess I would try it. It's not high on my list.
That's the potluck we're gonna have to do when we all are coming back in the office.
Woe be to the person who brings sliced pickles and nacho cheese to a potluck. That'll be the last potluck our office ever has.